I am deeply aware of this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty, which have now passed to me.
Something is very wrong inside the big, beautiful walls of Buckingham Palace. It is not the kind of news that you will hear on a loud TV show or read in a regular news report. It is a different kind of secret. It is the kind of secret that travels through the long, dark hallways in very quiet whispers. You can see it in the way some people are not invited to parties anymore. You can see it when big events are suddenly canceled for no clear reason. King Charles III is still sitting on the throne. His face is still on the money, and he still goes to big events looking very brave and very serious. He wants everyone to think that everything is okay and that the royal family is as strong as a mountain. But behind those thick stone walls, the people who work there know the truth. They know that things have changed forever. Prince William is not just waiting to be king anymore. He is actually running things right now. He is doing it quietly and carefully, and his father, the king, knows all about it. The big choices, the plans for the future, and the ways to fix big problems are all coming from William now. People still respect King Charles, and they tell him what is happening, but William is the one moving the crown forward. There is a huge crisis at the middle of all of this. It is a scandal that broke the nice image Queen Camilla worked so hard to build. It involves a set of secret papers and a name that the royal family has tried to hide for a very long time. That name is Jeffrey Epstein. This whole story is not just about a scandal, though. It is about a crown that came way too late for a man who waited his whole life for it. It is about a family trying to stay together while their world feels like it is falling apart. Welcome to the Palace Veil, where we pull back the curtain to see what is really going on with the world's most famous family. Before we get into the deepest secrets of the palace, please take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us bring you these stories, and you definitely do not want to miss what we have to tell you next. Now let's talk about that crown that came too late. King Charles waited almost his entire life to become the king. Think about that for a moment. He waited 73 years. That is longer than most people even work at their jobs. He was 73 years old when his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, passed away in the year 2022. She had been the queen for 70 years. Charles had the longest wait to be king in the history of the whole country. While he was waiting, he spent his time thinking about a lot of things. He cared about how buildings were built, he cared about organic farming, and he cared a lot about the planet. He had all these big ideas that he wanted to use once he finally got to wear the crown. He watched the world change around him. He watched his family get into fights, fix them, and then get into more fights. His life was always under a giant magnifying glass. Everyone was always talking about him and his personal life. Finally, after all those years, the crown was his. For a little while, it seemed like everything was going exactly how it was supposed to go. Charles took his job very seriously. He knew that some people weren't sure if a king was even needed anymore. He knew that the family had been through a lot of messy scandals. He wanted to show that he could be a good leader just like his mother. But he had only just started to show the world what kind of king he would be when he got some very bad news. In February 2024, the doctors found out he had cancer. The palace told the public very carefully. They used big, fancy words to say it was serious, but that everyone should stay calm. They said the king was getting medicine and was still doing his work. But behind the scenes, things were much harder. Imagine being 75 years old and finally getting the job you dreamed of, only to get sick just 18 months later. Cancer does not care about being a king or having a busy schedule. Charles tried to get back to work quickly. He would show up at events and look very calm, but people who watched him closely saw the truth. He didn't have the same energy he used to have. He was moving slower and being very careful with his strength. He was doing his best to stay dignified, but his body was fighting a very hard battle that the public didn't know the full details of. His treatment went on for a long time, all through 2024 and into 2025. Anyone who has ever known someone with cancer knows how scary and tiring it can be. Every time the palace gave an update, they were very careful with their words. They never said he was completely cured. They never promised he would be back to 100%. The king was still meeting with the leaders of the government and going to meetings, but he was doing it while he was very sick. People started to realize that his time as king might be remembered more for his illness than for the things he wanted to do. By early 2026, people who saw Charles said he was still very kind and thoughtful, but that spark of energy he used to have was gone. He was a king still doing his job, but he was also a man who realized that his big plans might never happen. This was the hardest part for his family to watch. They saw him trying so hard to hold on to the dream he had waited 70 years for. But while Charles was struggling with his health, another huge problem was growing. To understand what happened to Queen Camilla, we first have to talk about Prince Andrew. In the fall of 2025, things with Andrew got very bad. For years, the name Jeffrey Epstein had been like a dark cloud over the royal family. Andrew had been in trouble because of his friendship with Epstein for a long time. The palace tried to handle it by keeping Andrew away from the public, but they didn't want to kick him out of the family completely because that felt too mean. It was a middle ground plan that didn't really work for anyone. In 2025, new papers came out that were much worse than the ones before. They had more details and more proof. Andrew's name was everywhere in these papers. The public was very angry. The newspapers wouldn't stop writing about it. Buckingham Palace said the king was very worried, but they knew they had to do more than just be worried. Every day that Andrew stayed in his big house at the Royal Lodge, it made the whole royal family look bad. It looked like they were protecting someone who had done something wrong. By October 2025, King Charles knew he had to make a very tough choice. He finally took away all of Andrew's royal titles and told him he had to move out of his house. This was the biggest move the palace had ever made regarding the Epstein problem. Most people were happy about it because it showed the palace was finally taking things seriously. But for Charles, it was a very sad and personal choice. Andrew is his little brother. No matter what Andrew did, it is hard to kick your own brother out of his home. Charles had spent years hoping the problem would just go away. He wanted to believe that everything would be okay. But he finally realized that he had to put the crown first. He did the right thing for the country, but it hurt him a lot. People could see the sadness on his face in the weeks after he made that choice. So think about this. The king was fighting cancer, he was tired from treatment, and he just had to kick his brother out. That is a lot for one person to handle. This is when the math started to change. This is when people started looking at Prince William. William was watching everything, and William was ready to lead. Nobody stood on a balcony and yelled that William was taking over. There was no big party or special speech about it. The way William took power was very quiet and slow. That is how real power usually changes hands. In the middle of 2025, people noticed that William was doing a lot more work. This wasn't just a son helping his sick dad for a week or two. This was something much bigger. William was being put in charge of things that used to be only for the king. The biggest sign happened in November 2025. There was a huge meeting in Brazil about the climate and the planet. For years, this was the most important topic for King Charles. He was famous for talking about the environment, but Charles didn't go to this meeting. William went instead, and William didn't just sit there and look nice. He talked to world leaders, he understood the hard rules, and he acted like the boss. The whole world saw him as the main voice for the royal family. Behind the scenes in London, even more things were changing. William's team started getting all the secret papers and briefings that usually only went to the king. The palace said they were just making sure William was informed in case of an emergency. But it was more than that. The people who advised the royal family started talking to William as the person who makes the final decisions. They were asking him what the family should say and what they should do for the next 10 years. These were the kinds of talks that never would have happened a couple of years ago. The royal family had made a choice, and they were sticking to it. William's help with the Prince Andrew situation also showed everyone he was ready. He was the one pushing for a fast and firm choice. He knew that the future of the monarchy depended on being honest and tough. He showed that he could put the job before his own feelings, and that is what a king has to do. During this time, Princess Catherine was also doing better and coming back to work. Having her by his side made William look even stronger. They weren't just a famous couple, they were a team. Catherine was focused on her work with young children, and she was doing a great job. Together, they looked like the foundation of the future. They looked like the people who were actually in charge. And then we have to talk about Queen Camilla. This was her hardest moment. To understand why, you have to remember how hard she worked to get where she was. When she married Charles in 2005, many people were very mean to her. They remembered her relationship with Charles while he was still married to Princess Diana. There was a lot of anger and sadness back then. Camilla was very smart about it. She didn't fight back or try to be the center of attention. She just did her job, stayed quiet, and waited for people to get used to her. It worked. By the time she was crowned queen, most people were okay with it. She had finally reached the top of the mountain. But then the Epstein papers came back to haunt the family again. In 2025, the new papers didn't just talk about Andrew. They started talking about the people around him. One of those names was Sarah Ferguson, who used to be married to Andrew. Sarah had already admitted years ago that Epstein had given her money, and she had said sorry for it. But the new papers showed that the connection might have been even deeper than people thought. This was a big problem because Sarah Ferguson and Queen Camilla are very close friends. They have been friends for a long time. In normal times, a friendship wouldn't be a big deal. But when everyone is talking about a scary scandal, being friends with someone connected to it is dangerous. Prince William made his feelings very clear. He felt that Camilla being friends with Sarah was a big risk for the royal family. He didn't want any more scandals. The message that got to Camilla was very tough. She was told she had to stop being friends with Sarah, or at least make sure no one ever saw them together again. It wasn't about whether they liked each other. It was about protecting the image of the crown. Camilla has been in the palace for a long time, so she knew what this meant. She knew that if she didn't listen, she could lose her power very quickly. So she went silent. She didn't say anything about the friendship at all. She kept doing her public jobs, but the newspapers started asking questions. When the palace doesn't say anything, people start to guess, and usually they guess the worst things. The way people wrote about Camilla started to change. It wasn't the old anger from the Diana days. It was a new kind of worry. They wondered if she was a problem for the king. Social media made the rumors spread even faster. The image of Camilla as a steady and safe queen was starting to break. For King Charles, this was heartbreaking. He was already sick with cancer, he was sad about his brother, and he was watching his son take over his power. And now, the woman he had loved for his whole life was being criticized again. He had fought so hard for decades to make sure people accepted Camilla. Now, just when he was at his weakest, her position was in danger. His helpers tried to keep the worst news away from him, but Charles is a smart man. He knew what the cold feeling in the palace meant for his wife. He knew that things were changing fast, and he couldn't stop it. The British royal family has lasted for hundreds of years because they are very good at one thing. They know how to change without looking like they are changing. They fix problems behind closed doors and always try to look calm on the outside. What started happening at the end of 2025 and into 2026 was a perfect example of this. There was no big announcement that William was the boss, but every little thing pointed in his direction. The way the palace talked to the government changed. The way meetings were set up changed. William was being treated as the main leader, not just the guy who is next in line. Even the government started talking to William's team directly. This kind of change doesn't happen by accident. It takes a lot of planning and everyone agreeing to it. In January 2026, there was a very big meeting with King Charles and his top advisors. We don't know exactly what they said, but right after that meeting, William got even more power. He got access to the most secret files in the country. By February, the palace had 2 different power centers. Charles was the king for the ceremonies and the traditions. He still looked like a king and did the symbolic parts of the job. But William was the one doing the real work. He was the one planning for the future and deciding how to handle the big scandals. He was the one worrying about the next generation. The palace tried very hard to be nice to Charles. They didn't want him to feel left out. But the truth is the power had moved, and everyone inside the palace knew it. You could see it in the way people acted. In the palace, power is shown through who is in the room. If you are in the important meetings, you have power. If you are not invited, you don't. And lately, Camilla was not being invited to the most important meetings anymore. Staff members and advisors who have worked there for a long time could see the signals. They started focusing more on what William wanted and less on what Camilla thought. This created a lot of tension, even if they didn't fight about it in public. Everyone could feel it. The palace is always looking 10 steps ahead. They never leave things to chance. They have a secret plan for what happens when a king passes away. For King Charles, that plan is called Operation Menai Bridge. It is named after a famous bridge in Wales. They have practiced every single detail. They know who will call the Prime Minister and how the news will be told to the world. They know that as soon as one king dies, the next one starts immediately. There is no break. William will become king the very second his father is gone. The big party for the coronation might not happen for a long time, but he will have the power right away. This is how the system stays stable. But right now, things are a little different because William is already doing most of the work before he even has the title. There is a rule from 1937 called the Regency Act. It says that if a king is too sick to do his job, the next person in line can take over the duties. If this happened, William would be the regent. He would do everything a king does, but he wouldn't be called King William yet. Interestingly, the king himself doesn't get to decide if this happens. A group of people, including Queen Camilla and some top judges, would have to agree to it in writing. This shows how the rules are set up to protect the crown, no matter what. If Charles passes away before Camilla, her life will change a lot. She won't be the queen anymore. She will be the Queen Dowager. That is a fancy way of saying she is the widow of a king. She won't be the Queen Mother because she is not William's mother. That was the role meant for Diana. Camilla would have to move out of Buckingham Palace and into a smaller house. She could still do some of her charity work, but she would have to check with King William first. Think about how that must feel for her. She spent her whole life trying to be accepted and finally became queen, only to realize that she might be pushed to the side very soon. How William handles this will be one of his first big tests as a leader. He will have to decide how much respect and space to give Camilla. People will be watching him very closely to see if he is kind or if he is cold. King Charles is still the king right now. He is still trying his best. He has not quit, and he is still doing his duties, but the world inside the palace has changed. A man who waited 73 years for his chance is now watching his son take over because he is too sick to do it all himself. The scandal with Camilla and the Epstein papers didn't end the monarchy, but it made everything happen faster. It showed everyone that the center of the family is now William. When the next big problem comes, everyone knows that William will be the one to fix it. Here at the Palace Vale, we see the truth behind the fancy clothes and the big crowns. We see a family going through a very hard time and a prince who is already running the show. It is a story of a king in tears, a queen under a lot of pressure, and a son who was born for this moment. The formal announcement might not be here yet, but the change has already happened. The future of the royal family is here, and it belongs to William. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive into the royal secrets. We really hope you found it interesting. If you did, please leave a comment below and let us know what you think about William taking over. Do you think he is ready? Also, don't forget to share this video with your friends who love royal history. We will see you in the next one. As we look deeper into the stories of the palace, we see that the weight of the crown is very heavy. It is not just about wearing a gold hat and sitting in a big chair. It is about making choices that hurt your own family to save the institution. King Charles had to do that with his brother, Andrew. He had to look at his own blood and say that the crown is more important. That is a very lonely feeling. And now, he is seeing the same thing happen with his wife. The rules of the palace are very old and very strict. They do not care about feelings. They only care about surviving. William understands this very well. He has watched his father and his grandmother for his whole life. He knows that being a king means you can't always be a normal person. You have to be a symbol. The shift in power to William is also about a change in generations. Charles represents the old way of doing things, while William is looking at the modern world. He is thinking about how to keep the royal family important in a world that is changing very fast. The scandal with Jeffrey Epstein was a reminder that the old ways of hiding secrets don't work anymore. In the age of the internet and social media, everything comes out eventually. William knows this, and that is why he wants to be more open and tougher on problems. He doesn't want the family to be defined by the mistakes of the past. He wants a fresh start. But a fresh start is hard when you are still dealing with the problems of today. The health of the king is the biggest